Welcome to Lead and Follow, a podcast that explores how great collaboration actually happens. I'm your host, Sharna Fabiano, author of the book Lead and Follow, The Dance of Inspired Teamwork. And I'm pleased to bring you the latest research, insights, and learning methods to help you work together better with the people around you. I help founders, solopreneurs, and new leaders become great at collaborating because I've seen how much more becomes possible when people integrate their ideas, perspectives, and strengths in a practical way. To learn more about coaching with me and for a one-time discount on your first session, go to sharnafabiano.com/coaching and enter the promo code podcast. The link is in the show notes. And now, here's the episode. Today I'm speaking with Dr. Yulia Tolstikov-Mast, a global leadership and followership expert and an award-winning international leadership scholar. Her interests include the internalization of leadership and followership education, non-Western approaches to leadership and followership, global followership and citizenship behaviors, and leader-follower role switching. Yulia is conducting ongoing research on Russian followership and was the co-investigator in Russia for the Globe 2020 research project, a large-scale study of cultural practices, leadership ideals, and trust in 150 countries. Currently, she teaches for the Ph.D. program in leadership and change at Antioch University. Today, I'm eager to learn from her specifically about the phenomenon of global followership and how collective action often has much greater influence on global leaders' decisions than we may imagine or expect. Yulia, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Sharna. I'm very excited to be here.
Me too. I can't wait to learn about this idea of global followership. And Yulia, as I understand it, you were actually the first to create a definition of these concepts, global follower and global followership. So I'd actually like to start us off, both for myself and for listeners, by asking you to give us maybe a short version of that definition and some context around this initial piece of your work.
The definition, the way I formulated it in 2016 hasn't really changed, and I'm very much looking forward for the audience to engage in discussions and in anyone jump on this wagon of global followership to expand the definition and think more about the definition. So the story started 2016 when I published an article, Global Followership, the Launch of the Scholarly Journey. The goal of the publication was really to make a case for standalone concepts of global follower and global followership. Concepts has been mentioned many times in scholarship, in practitioners' literature, but we never had definitions or clear definitions of those concepts. So I decided to make that pioneering step and formulate what I think global follower is and what global followership is. So global follower is an exemplary individual who freely, constructively, and courageously contributes to a mutually empowering partnership with global leaders and who shares talent with global leaders to benefit global leadership outcomes in a complex global environment. So it's definitely a pretty lengthy definition, but to simplify it, I might say that global follower is someone who definitely exhibits free will and would like to contribute to some goals outside of just traditional local paradigm and wants to connect to global causes or global goals. So based on that, global followership is a relational process where we have global leaders and global followers. And this is a process of constructive contribution from global followers to global leadership outcomes. And those outcomes are definitely, they're mediated by diverse followers' characteristics, their behaviors, and everything takes place within a global society and global environment.
How exciting. I'm eager to get into the behaviors and the actions of these global followers. But before we do that, listeners know that I've had many conversations on this show around the followership role in the context of an organization or a workplace team. So I would love to hear how global followership is either similar to that or different from that, or both.
We can see that global followers resemble traditional followers. We can say that both global and local followers exist in relations to leaders, right? To local leaders or global leaders. Both follow because of free will. It's not something that someone forces them to do. They're not coerced. They decide to follow because they want to do that. And also, they choose to be followers based on how they're motivated by causes, by mission, by leaders' vision, and so forth. At the same time, separating global followers and local followers, we can say that unlike traditional followers, global followers perform their roles in a global multi-dimensional environment where in order to follow, they cross geographic, economic, legal, political, and so forth boundary. And because of that, the complexity of leading and following and intensity definitely increases if we compare to just a local way of leading following.
Thank you. That distinction of domain is super helpful. So, where am I following? And therefore, who am I forming relationships with in order to follow? Is it in my town, in my company? Is it part of a broader movement or a cause that transcends a certain location or a certain entity? And I think I'm also hearing that it's not only the change of domain that makes the distinction, but it's the fact that when we change domain from local to global, that actually changes the nature of the followership. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes. In followership, we say followership doesn't exist without leadership, right? So it's the same dynamic, of course, in global context. And if we put together global leaders and global followers, and we look at complexity of the interaction and relationships, boundary spanning that they need to span, again, so many boundaries to connect and accomplish things together, this kind of spatial dimension where they might be in one space or they might be in many spaces, right? In different countries, in different locations. So definitely, that is everything that contributes to how global followers behave and how they act, again, exhibit their global followership roles.
Could you speak to that complexity a bit more so we get a sense of what the leader-follower relationship might look like or feel like on a global scale?
I can give you an example just thinking about myself as a global follower. There is a company that's called Title 9. It's a clothing company. And it's women-owned and led and operated. I do like the products. I buy products. I provide feedback. I look at myself as an active follower, not only of a product, but what women do and stories that they publish on the website of the Title 9 company. And just going to the website, and it says who we are, right? So the mission, I very much identified with the mission, and I'm very active how I support that mission. It's not a large corporation. It has no outside investors, and they solicit ideas from women who own businesses, what they would like to wear and feel comfortable. It's a company that believes that outdoors and a good workout can be the antidote to many of life problems. And again, it's totally who I am and what I do when I need to distress. So I follow them on social media, but in addition to that, I buy products, and as an active follower, I provide feedback on products and services, not only to help the company and the women who the company empowers, but also kind of see what I want in a product to be materialized through clothing that they offer.
What a great example. I had no idea that Title IX existed. I'm definitely going to check it out. And one thing I love about this story is that it almost redefines what it is to be a business with this mission forward model where the revenue is a part of what they do, but it's not the only thing that matters. And in doing that redefinition of the business, it also redefines what it means to be a consumer, who would be the follower in this case, because you're submitting your ideas, you're more involved, you're supporting the mission, not only by buying products, but also by communicating your feedback, making suggestions. That's really fascinating to me.
Yes, and in this example, I envision followers and myself as a global follower, that we are a force in numbers, in opinions, in actions. What we can see right now, I did just a preliminary analysis, and I would like to look more into it. People are more and more connected to social justice causes, be it social responsibility or, environmental consciousness. And we have that force, but we don't understand much what they can do. We see changes, but to understand how to capitalize on that power and how to recognize that power and channel that power in the right direction is definitely something amazing. I have another example I thought about. It's about soccer. It's one of the most popular sports, 5.5 billion followers. I was curious how, if that energy of all the soccer followers is utilized towards anything that we would consider kind of social justice causes. So actually, around pandemic time, several very prominent football players started advancing different causes around homelessness, child poverty in the UK. It was Marcus Rashford, for example, or a social justice campaign through TV advertisement. That was Raheem Sterling. Of course, all of us know Megan Rapinoe, right? She's a U.S. football player, and she won the World Cup, and she supported Colin Kaepernick's protest against police brutality in the U.S. So a lot of her messages resonated with football players, and as a result of that and her advocacy for LGBTQ rights, equal pay for women, things started changing. Right. So again, the message that was initiated by soccer players, amplified by their followers, and we said that's 5.5 billion people in the world, it started making changes in the world.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you for those relatable examples. And I also love the words you used here because, they kind of resonate with my dance experience, the initiation of the player, right? The more visible player, and the amplification of the followership force, right? And, on a really small scale on the dance floor between like two tango partners, we use similar language, at least I do sometimes, where, the leader is initiating and inviting, and then the follower is like embodying those things or amplifying them, making them like bigger and more visible, more felt, more real. So I love that just conceptual dynamic. And it sounds like really ripe territory for a team of researchers. So if you are excited about exploring this phenomenon of the followership force, the global followership force, please reach out to Yulia.
I would like to add very quickly to what you said. In your vision of followers and leaders on a dance floor, you also talk about role switching. And that's something that I see in the global followership arena as well. So if values and visions were initiated and amplified by followers kind of took charge of that and moved it forward beyond just leaders to take idea and turn it into action So that is a leadership function, right? So now our followers, all those billions of them, are forcing governments to look into LGBTQ rights and look at policies. And of course, in the US, we know police brutality has been addressed by many sport players. But again, the public, the followers, they are pushing ideas into action. So for me, this is kind of this leader-follower role switching, but leader becomes a collective large group. So that's even a different dynamic, not just one leader and a follower, but a group of leaders and large groups of followers who are switching roles.
Yeah, super fascinating. Any other examples you'd like to share, maybe from another domain or another sector of society, to kind of bring this to life a little more?
I was really fascinated by a book that I read recently. It's a memoir, autobiography written by Nobel Prize laureate Leymah Gbowee. She's a Liberian peace activist, social worker, women's rights advocate, and she's a founder and president of the Gbowee Peace Foundation in Africa. Her book, titled Mighty Be Our Powers, written in 2013, talks about how Gbowee led a lot of activities, and it talks about her transformation and development as a leader who was at the center of activities in Liberia that helped to stop the war. At the same time, in that book, what fascinated me also, the focus was not on leaders or followers. Gbowee really elevated voices of many women and many women's groups, international as well as local in Liberia or Monrovia in other countries in Africa. The situation in Liberia is not stable by any means, and it's very, very volatile, conflict ongoing. At the same time, just from that book, the public power, collective power with collective voices made the war to stop and made all this aggression to stop.
I wanted to jump in here with another question that's come to mind. And a lot of folks ask me about the relationship between followership and activism, especially in terms of social movements. So I wonder if you have thought of that relationship, or if you could, again, maybe distinguish between social activism, the way that we use it sort of in common parlance, and this force you're describing as global followership, which feels to me a little more expansive. But I'd love to just hear how you language the difference there.
In my opinion, global followership is a function that could take place in many contexts. Some of those contexts are organizational. One of the first kind of mentions of global follower in a global business context was a book, Lenovo Way, talking about how global workforce really helped to transform the company. And, people within the company within Lenovo provided ideas that led to innovation and so forth. So definitely global followership was very visible in all those activities. So again, we could observe global followership in organizations. It could be not-for-profit. Donald Williams has a brilliant dissertation on followership in Japan, in not-for-profit sector. And of course, we can observe global followership in social movements and in social activism. Toby Zimmer has research on global followership and Women's March. So again, just to make that connection, how is global followership possible within those large societal movements? We don't really know or understand, again, a lot about that connection, but from thinking about who followers are and going back to the definition that I have, those are courageous, diverse individuals, and courage means I am crossing geographic, political, language boundaries because sometimes, not everything is in the language that a follower speaks, right? So it's a courage to step outside of that comfort zone and say, I'm making a stand, I'm acting. How I'm acting, I'm going to buy a product or I'm not going to buy a product. I am supporting a cause or I'm not supporting a cause, right? It's our actions that speak louder than words. If we, as global followers, support the vision of social movements, we have Black Lives Matter, and again, just an example of Women's March. We have other movements around to stop war in Gaza. So you have people who are actively calling their legislators, advocating for United States to intervene to stop the war. And you have others who are just saying, I don't want to have war in Gaza, but they're not doing anything. How would we consider them followers or not? All those questions are fascinating. And that's why we need more people to have those type of discussions.
I think I might have conflated activism with followership in my own mind, as if they were always the same thing. But now hearing you describe the subtlety and the multifaceted ways that these forces can interact, I'm thinking that global activism itself is like a specialized domain where we may want to enact a certain kind of global followership or global leadership or some other type of followership or leadership. And if we analyze a social issue or a movement in that broader way, maybe without the activist label, we can get maybe an even finer grain read on how to achieve certain goals, for example. Because at the end of the day, to say there's activism going on, it's attached to some sort of cause, right, or issue. Does that track with what you're seeing?
Yes, it's definitely exactly what I'm thinking. And we can have examples of Greenpeace or Habitat for Humanity and other organizations that advance social causes, and activism is just one way to follow those causes, right? But there are other ways. More active, less active, more individual. For example, global followership could be me reaching out to a colleague across the world and asking to contribute to causes that I'm passionate about, like, for example, a war in Ukraine, right? So I have been supporting those efforts. So how do I act as a global follower to advance the causes, to support the causes? It doesn't mean that, I maybe motivate a large number of people around me. It could be just reaching out to someone across the globe, as I've done, and connecting with them, and they connect with their neighbors. And now we develop that connection that, we are all empowering each other, and we're listening to what's going on, discussions that take place on the global leadership arena between the countries and politicians. We're paying attention and we're acting to support those actions or not support those actions.
Thank you. That's also super helpful and inspiring, because I think I and maybe other listeners sometimes get stuck when we run into a big global issue with this feeling of despair, like, what can I do? It's too big. It's so much bigger than me. But what you've just illustrated is that there's so many different ways to respond, to act, to take a followership action. And it might not be like going out into the streets with a big crowd. That's just one way to act. There's a phone call, there's a letter, there's a reaching out, there's any number of things. And that's really helpful for me, just to open my own imagination about what I can possibly do as a global follower, right, in relation with these larger causes. I wonder if you want to throw out any other example actions or behaviors that you've noticed so far, just to give listeners another kind of, I don't know, way to get their head around what this looks like?
Another example could be whistleblowers and how they change the world. It's National Whistleblower Center, NWC, that over the years has been collecting information about all kinds of whistleblowers and the activities from Swiss bankers who exposed massive tax evasion at Swiss Bank to, of course, we have Enron, right, in the US. We have scientists who exposed forensic fraud at the FBI, army officers reporting on millions in fraud cases. So those whistleblowers, they were members of their organizations or of their groups, and they saw what was happening around, and they had courage to step outside of their comfort zones, right, and act. And of course, they inspired and empowered others to act. So that's why there were big cases and lawsuits and so forth. And of course, their examples empower others. Now, the concept of whistleblower was kind of new, maybe unique several decades ago. And right now, we talk about it, and we are excited that we have those whistleblowers who are active, proactive, and courageous followers who have a vision, they follow the vision, and they make things happen.
Whistleblowers are followers who change the world. That's one of my takeaways. And I really want to underline what you're saying here so that it's very clear to listeners that we really can make things happen, as you say, from the global followership role. So it is an active, impactful place to operate from. You have given us such great examples, like many different sectors. I wonder what other questions you yourself are wanting to answer about global followership. It's sort of this new big area that you're exploring. What would you like to know?
I would like to know more as it pertains to our everyday existence in this universe, on this planet. We're facing global crisis after global crisis, right? And we are concerned about planetary health. That's what I'm working on right now, just to think through what does it really mean? Global followership, power, empowering others for planetary health. How can we construct this social justice framework and connect to maybe potentially what it means to be a global citizen? Global citizenship is a very UN concept, very much connected to how do we educate global citizens. I'm thinking, how could we empower global citizens or even educate them as global followers, that they know they have that power to change the world and that they can take steps and save the planet?
I wonder if global citizens globally lead and globally follow.
Mm-hmm.
A global citizen is like the identity, maybe, but it's not necessarily the power, as you're suggesting. It moves into power when we say, how do then global citizens follow? How do they lead? How do they lead and follow? So like that as a verb,
Mm-hmm.
the verb structure for the global citizenship. How would you suggest listeners kind of start looking around their lives for this? If we want to start seeing ourselves as global followers, what could I start paying attention to?
So my suggestion would be maybe start with, what are my values?
Mm-hmm.
What are my passions and causes? How they connected maybe to global changes and global causes? How could I help? How could I involve others? How can I act and amplify the message? Those are the questions I ask myself as well. We have conversations when we pose questions, who are you as a global leader? Well, I suggest we start posing questions. Who are you as a global follower? And really attach energy to that question.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, it's very different, those two questions. I almost feel like, and maybe it's just me because I have a bias, obviously, but I almost feel like who am I as a global follower is a little easier, right? Because like, who am I as a global leader? I'm like, whoa, I don't know. Like that seems, I need followers then to direct, right? And it seems really hard to get to, but who am I as a global follower is like, well, what do I want to support? What one little thing can I do in support of something I already identify as important? It almost seems more accessible, and that's pretty exciting for me.
I was also thinking in the context of a global leadership training, in that for-profit context, there are global leadership talent development activities. And this is when, you singling out people who are on leadership track to be executives in the company. So that's what kind of the framework I had in mind when I said that question. You introduced the question, so that kind of shows the multifaceted and diverse view on global follower, right? You introduced that and thought about that question from a different perspective. But executives very often are asked to identify their capacities, capabilities as global leaders. And that's what bothers me a little, because, who will follow then? Or who are we as followers when company has social responsibility mission, right? And we need to act on that mission. So what does it really mean?
Yeah, absolutely. How is it really going to happen if no one is going to follow it?
Yeah.
Really important. So, Yulia, thank you so much for this inspiring and mind-expanding conversation. Please do share with listeners where they can get in touch with you and learn more about your current work.
I encourage everyone interested in anything global followership related, connect with me on LinkedIn. I am thinking about forming a networking group where we can collaborate and meet periodically just to share ideas. Toby Zimmer and I have been discussing and working on the upcoming publication titled just tentatively Global Followership, a Force to be Reckoned with. So it's about followers and their power and influence. So how we need to recognize and understand that force. And I welcome listeners to review that upcoming publication and, of course, provide feedback. And I look forward to other opportunities to interact and learn together and collaborate.
Please do join Yulia and myself and many, many other enthusiastic global followership scholars and practitioners at the next Global Followership Conference, April 25 and 26 in Glasgow, Scotland. Please do check the show notes for the many references in this episode. And thank you once again, Yulia, for sharing your groundbreaking research and thinking with us. I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you very much for having me.
You have been listening to the Lead and Follow podcast. Special thanks to Glover Gill for composing our music. And a huge thank you to all of you who support the show. It really means a lot. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or consider joining the Lead and Follow fan club for as little as $3 a month. There's a link at the bottom of the show notes.